Hello and welcome to the next part of this series. Today we are going to be improving the user experience just by showing the user which asteroid he's going to hit if he just fires the rocket at the position he is by highlighting the asteroid red. So if I hover over here, the asteroid gets highlighted red if I can hit it for sure, which is about this position for these asteroids. So let's get started. And as always, you can get this scene and the end scene from the links down below. So first up, we are going to make our material for the highlighted asteroids. So go to the asteroids and go to the prefabs and actually just look at what material we are using. So if I go to the LD1, LD2 and LD3, we are using the asteroid small material. So just go open it up, and if I change the albedo to some like reddish color, I see that this object also changes. And if I go out of the 2D mode, I'll probably see it better. So this is basically what we want. So let's look at the material. So go to the small asteroid material right here and just duplicate it by hitting Ctrl D or Control D. And then after you have the duplicate, just go and drag and drop it in your, let's say, prefabs folder. Now, right click on the material and let's call this the small asteroid, and then just red like this. Now let's go to the asteroid prefab and let's open up the asteroid script and let's make some kind of public material so that we can actually change it and call it the target material. Now we also need two public functions so we can change the material once we figure out if the asteroid is targeted or not. So let's make a public void and let's call this reset material. And let's also make a public void and set target material. These two functions are going to set and reset the material. So if I go to Unity and let's figure out how this is going to work. The script sits on the asteroid 1 prefab, but we need to access these components, the asteroid level of detail 0 through 2. And we have to access the renderer component because the renderer component contains the reference to the material. If I go to the child of the asteroid 1 right here, this has a level of detail group, which is quite awesome for mobile games because if I am far away, the level of detail is just going to change. And if I go really far away, it's called, which means that there is no actual level of detail used. And if I click on this, and then this, you can see the difference right here, right? This is like literally no detail and this is quite detailed. So if I go to Unity, we need to get the renderer components in the children. So let's make a public array of renderers and call this the renderers. Since this script sits on the parent, we need to get the renderers from the children. So just go renderers equals to the get components with an S right here, get components in children. And then we want to get the renderer component, renderer, and just like that, and now we should have the renderers in this array. Now, if we reset the material, let's check if the renderers are equal to 0. So if it's equal to null, then we want to return and don't do anything in this function, just a precaution. And also, this is the target material, that's fine, but we also need the base material. So let's make a private material like this, and let's call this the base material. And let's set the base material up in the start function. So this is going to be equal to the renderers since we got the renderers. And then the 0 index dot material. It doesn't really matter. All the renderers have the same material at the start, right? And if we want to reset the material, it means that the material in the renderers is a different material than at the start. So we just want to reset it to the base material, which means that we have a for each loop and we want to go through each renderer. So renderer, let's call this rend in renderers. Like this. And for each rend, we want to set the material equal to the base material. So we want to basically reset. And then if we want to set the target material, we just copy and paste this. And for where we set the material from the renderer, we want to set it to the, what did we call it? The target material. Right there. And this is it for the asteroid collider. If you go back to Unity and select the small asteroid material red, we actually need to change it to a red material. So select the albedo and just make it red like this. And then also go to the asteroid 1 and drag and drop the red material in here. Let's also make a couple of more asteroids. So go back to the scene view right here. And then go to the asteroids folder and the prefabs and just drag and drop the second and third asteroid in here. And go to the asteroid 1 and also drag this in here, your prefab, okay, not the pre-made prefab. So, and in the asteroid 1 field, copy, right click and copy the asteroid controller right here, copy component and paste it in the second and third right here. The paste component is new, and then the second one also paste component is new. And let's change this for something like, let's say 300, and then let's say here we can also do like 450. And the renderers don't need to be public. They should be private. Sorry for that. Just change that up. Double click on the Asteroid 2. Drag it out so we can see it actually. And then add a component. Let's add a collider. And we probably want to add a capsule collider to this. And click on the Edit Collider and click on the is trigger. That's quite important. And well, what do we want? We want to probably bump up the height and then the radius a little bit like this. This looks good. Now go to your prefabs folder, to your prefabs folder, okay, and the Asteroid 2, just drag and drop it in here, and original prefab. Now delete it from the scene. We can delete the first one also, and now the third one, and again drag it up and add a collider, and this is going to be a sphere collider. Click on the Edit Collider and also on the is trigger, and then just bump up the radius to something like this. This is quite okay. And also drag and drop it in your prefabs folder. Delete it from the scene and then go to your Asteroid Manager. And for the Asteroid prefab size, bump this up to 3 and just drag the second one in here and the third one in here. I also wanted to do one thing with the shooting. Now if we shoot, we access the in-game manager and then shoot from here. What I want to do is set it up a little differently. So go to your player controller script and let's make an array of transforms. Let's make a public transform array and call this the missile spawn points. And also open up your in-game manager script. So in-game manager, double click that. And what do we need? We want to change basically the shooting to a different script. So let's remove the rocket prefab right here and paste it in here. We don't need these transforms. We just want to delete them. We are going to use this array instead, because in the next tutorial we're going to start setting up our shop where we will have more spaceships available, which means that different spaceships might fire different amounts of rockets, not just 2, let's say 3 or just maybe 1. We'll see. That's why we want an array which can be dynamically looped over to this, and we also want the can fire and the public fire interval in here. Let's copy and paste this in here, and let's also remove a couple of functions. So the on fire button clicked is going to access the player controller, which means that we also need a public reference, so a public player controller, and let's call this the player controller. Let's copy this player controller and put it in here. Let's then make a function, let's say fire rockets. This function does not exist right now. We are going to make that in a while, and then let's copy this, if the can fire rockets and whatsoever, and go to the player controller. Let's make a new function under the update function. Let's make a public void, and we call this the fire rockets. So fire rockets. And now in this function, I cut out the part in here on the fire button clicked, and I'll just paste it in here. If can fire rockets. We don't need the fire rockets function. We want a for each loop. So for each transform t in the spawn transforms right here, the missile spawn points. This is going to spawn as many missiles as we have spawn points, which is going to take care of the problem that if we have a spaceship with just one spawn point, we don't want to spawn multiple missiles. In here, just loop through all the spawn points, and let's go back to the in-game manager and look what the fire rocket function did. So just copy this, basically one of these 2 lines, and then delete the function. We don't need that anymore, and paste in the instantiate function. So the rocket prefab, at which position we want the transform, the T right here, dot position and quaternion identity. That's quite alright, and can fire false. And we also need the rocket delay function. So just copy this or cut it out and paste it under here, and we should be good to go. Now go back to Unity and the star spiral. We still need to set up a couple of references. So we can collapse the Bob's collider for now, the rigid body. And now for the missile spawn points, we want to drag the spawn point 1 in here and spawn point 2. And then we can collapse this one, the rocket prefab. So go to your prefabs folder and just drag the rocket prefab in here. And also in the in-game manager, we need a reference to the player controller. So drag that in there. And now if we start the game, we should have the same result as we had last tutorial at the end. So just, we should be able to shoot rockets right here with the button, and it works. So bam, bam, bam. And yeah, we can destroy stuff, and we can also die if we get hit by something like this. Awesome. Let's now start working on the reddening of the asteroids. So what we want to do is basically raycast from these 2 spawn points, from this point and this point, in this direction, and check if we hit an asteroid. So to do that, we actually want a layer so we don't hit anything else. So go to the asteroid prefabs right here in your prefabs folder. and click all of them and add a layer, and let's call this the enemy raycast layer. Now, select them again, and for all of these objects change the layer to enemy raycast layer, and now we just want to change the parent object, so no this object only, like this. This is quite good. And now we have to code a little bit in the player controller script. For the raycasting, we need a raycast direction, a distance, and a layer mask. So let's make a private vector 3, and let's call this the raycast direction. And this is going to be equal to a new vector 3, and this is going to be just 0 on the x, 0 on the y, and we want to basically cast on the z-axis like this, 0, 0, 1. Now we want a public float, and let's call this the raycast distance. This is going to be equal, let's say, to 100 float. And let's also make a int layer mask. This layer mask integer is going to represent the enemy raycast layer. So just click on add layer and copy this right now and go back. Don't do anything in the Unity inspector. Go back to Unity, and in the start function, the layer mask is going to be equal to. So we want the layer mask dot, and this is called the get mask function, and this wants a string. So this integer is going to just get set in the start function to this layer, so we can use it on the raycast later. Let's start with the raycasting. Let's make a new function under the update. Let's make a private void and call this raycast for asteroids, and also call this function right under the calculate new boundaries so that we know where we are in the current frame right here, and what this function is going to do. So we are going to check if we have any asteroids in our path, which just means we need a raycast hit. Call this the hit, and now we are going to loop through every single missile transform that spawns a rocket. So just go for the transform, and let's call this missile spawn point. In the missile spawn points, now we have to check and raycast in front of it. So let's make a ray. Let's call this the ray, and this is going to be equal to a new, again, ray. And what we want in here is basically, if we look at it, we want a origin, which is going to be the missile spawn point dot position, and the direction is going to be the raycast direction. Now we can shoot a ray. So if the physics dot raycast, and this is going to take in, let's say, a ray, then the out is going to be stored in the hit variable that we have at the top right here. And then also let's make a raycast direction. That's what it wants. And now it wants a max float, a distance. So let's make a raycast distance. And the last one is going to be our layer, so layer mask right there. Now if this hits something, and we can actually the raycast hit also move out down in here. And now if we hit something, that means that we certainly hit a asteroid, because the asteroid has the layer mask that we are looking for, and the raycast won't hit anything else. So now the game object, this is the target that we hit, is going to be the hit.transform.game object, and now we can actually do something and change the material. But to do that, we actually need a little bit more stuff. So let's make a list up here in the variables section. Let's make a private list, and this is going to be the game object list, and it's going to be equal to a new list like this, and let's call this the previous targets. This function gets called every single frame, but we don't really need to update the color of them every single frame, because if we stay at the same position with our spaceship, we don't want to loop through all the asteroids and then update the color of them and reset them on whatsoever. So we actually have to figure out what the asteroids in the last frame were, and then compare them with the current asteroids that we hit. Let's make a list of game objects, and let's call this the current targets, and this is just going to be a new list of game objects. And the current targets are going to be in here. So if we hit something, the current targets.add, we want to add the target to the current target list, and that's good. And now down here we want to check if the two lists are the same. So check if the previous and the current targets are the same. Now how are we going to do that? This is a list, the current targets, and the previous targets is also a list. So just check if the lists are exactly the same. So now if the current targets list.count is not going to be equal to the previous targets list.count, then they are different, that's for sure. So let's make a bool. Let's say bool list changed, and let's set that equal to false. If something changed, we want this to be true. This is one instance where the lists can be different, but we also can have a list with the same amount of objects in it, but just different objects in it, obviously. So let's make a else, and this is going to be just a loop. So a for int I is equal to 0 while I is less than the current targets dot count, and then plus plus I like this. And here we just check. So if the current targets on the I index is not equal to the previous targets on the I index, then it's going to be false. So list changed is true because the lists are not the same. And down here we just want to basically call some function that is going to change the asteroids if the list changed. So if list changed is going to be true, then we want to update asteroids. And else we don't really want to do anything. Here we just want to set the previous targets to the current targets also. And if the two lists are the same, we can just leave the previous targets alone and don't really need to update it. But here we still need to update the asteroids. So let's make a function for that. Go back to Unity, go to your scripts folder and open up your Asteroid Manager. So in here, this is a singleton, which is going to be quite handy. And in here, we also want to track all the asteroids that are currently alive. So let's make a public list of game objects and just call this list the alive asteroids and set it equal to a new list. Every time we spawn an asteroid, we want to add the asteroid to the asteroid list. So now in the spawn new asteroid function, just make a game object. Let's call this the game object. It's going to be equal to the instantiate function that we have in there already. And just the alive asteroids.add, and we want to add the game object in here. And that's good. And down here, let's make a new public void and then update asteroids. And in here, we want to pass in a list of game objects. And this is going to be the target asteroids list. Or maybe even targeted asteroids, right? Like that. And now, let's loop through all the alive asteroids. So for each game object, and this is going to be the asteroid in the alive asteroids list. And in here, we want to check if the asteroid that we are currently looping through is actually in the targeted asteroids list. So just go to the targeted asteroids list and dot contains, and then we want to check if it contains the asteroid. This is a game object that we just loop through currently. Then we want to change it to red, and else we want to basically reset it. So just if we want to change it to red, so go to asteroid.getComponent and then just get the component, the asteroid controller, and then just call the setTargetMaterial function right here. And just copy this and paste it down here. And instead of calling the setTargetMaterial, we want to reset the material like so. Awesome. We have to do one last thing because we are adding all the game objects to the alive asteroids list. But if the asteroid passes the user or the asteroid gets destroyed, we have to remove the asteroid from the asteroids alive list, or we will get a null reference when looping through them. So go to your asteroids controller. So let's open up the asteroids controller. And in here where we check in the update function if the transform.z is behind the camera, where before we destroy the game object, we actually want to go to the Asteroid Manager .instance and this is the list, so alive asteroids. And here we want to do .remove, and we want to remove this game object from the list. And we also need to copy this line, this exact line, and just where we destroy the asteroids with a rocket or anything else. We again don't want to loop through them, so let's remove it from the alive list. And now still we have created this update asteroids function, and we still kind of need to call it to actually make use of it. So just go in here in the player controller, and where we check if the list has changed, we want to basically update the asteroids. So just go to the Asteroid Manager .instance .update asteroids and pass in the list that we have changed, so the current targets list right there. And one last but important thing we forgot is the asteroids 2 and 3. We actually need to change the tag to the asteroids tag right here, the asteroid. I'll just cheat a little bit and add a little bit more health. Let's say something like 50. And also go to the asteroids manager and let's make the spawn time like 2 seconds. Now, if I start the game with all the changed variables, we should have enough time to look at it. Now I see those asteroids here, and now if I hover over this one on the far, what is it, left, right here, I see him turn red, and if I hit this button, the asteroid will most certainly get hit by it. So awesome. Now we have some kind of UI to display. So let's say this. I can hit those asteroids right there and fire and hit the asteroid right here. If I do done here, and I can see what asteroids I'm going to hit if I fire the rockets right here. Awesome. And I'm sure you liked the video because you now can see what you're going to hit, which is quite awesome, if I may say so. And please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and see you in the next one. Bye!